Please welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if this is your first time here, you're welcome to Style by Taiwo. In this video, I'll be teaching how to make this beautiful Ankara shared and also three-step gala dress. If this is what you like, don't forget to subscribe, and also don't forget to drop a beautiful comment. So this is what my own dress looks like. I was able to make mine, but mine was a bit shorter, so I'll be explaining how I went about that in this video. For this dress, I use about 3 yards of Ankara fabric, but if you want yours to be fuller and longer, you could go for 4 yards of Ankara fabric. So thank you for stopping by. Let's get started. Okay, so what I have right here, I've gone ahead to cut out my upper parts, and I will just want to explain how I went about it. So first of all, I went ahead to cut for the front and the back. So you measure where you want your up to start from, like it's an off shoulder, so you measure where you want the up to start from, and from there is where you're going to mark on your top, your material when cutting out, and you go ahead to mark out the length. So for the length, you're not just going to mark out the length. So for my length, I'm working with 18 inches. You measure where you want your top to start. For me, I want to work with 18 inches, and I'll add 1 inches for my up folding allowance, and I'll also go ahead to add 5 inches for the down part, because when you smoke it, the length tends to shorten. And so for the side, what I'm going to do also, I'm going to measure get my highest measurement for the width part and add 5 inches to it. So if your bust is your highest measurement, so when you divide your bust by 4, you're going to add 5 inches, or better still, you add 4 inches. So that is how you're going to go ahead to cut out for both the up front and the back. So after the next thing you just want to do now is to fold this up part before smoking. So the next thing you want to do now is to smoke, but before then, you want to smoke straight lines. And like when sewing your rubber thread, you want your lines to be straight, and you might want to take your time to mark out half inches round and lay out the straight lines on the fabric, so that when you're sewing on your machine, it will serve as a guide so you don't sew bend. But me, I'm not going to really do this. I'm going to sew like that, but I just want to show you what you're going to do. So you might want to go ahead, take your chalk and go ahead to mark out half inches from up to the down, so it will serve as a guideline so that you don't sew, your lines are not shaky and they will be straight. So the next thing you want to do after this now is our rubber thread. So you're going to get your rubber thread and get your ruler. So this rubber thread is going to be in the ruler only. So you just want to roll it round with your hand on your ruler. Reason being that it does not have to be too stretched. You don't have to stretch it at all. Just go ahead to roll it around. So I was just trying to be fast while doing this, but you just have to take your time and do that. So here I'm done with that, and I'm going to put this in my shuttle and put it under. So our rubber thread is just going to be under, while we'll be using our normal thread for the upper part of this. So I will suggest that when using this, you get a different shuttle. So right here, what I'm going to do now is to sew on these straight lines that we have. But me, I did not go too far with the straight lines. I trusted myself that I'm going to sew straight. So if you don't trust yourself, you should actually go and draw a straight line, so you get your stitches straight. So up, what I have is my normal thread, and down is my rubber thread. So you go ahead to sew it straight and repeat this until you get to the end. So you just go ahead, after you're done with that, you go to the next step. So if you've drawn yours, you go to the next line that you drew, and if you're working with half inches, you work with half inches. If you're working with 1 inches, but I feel 1 inches is too much, so the best you could work with for this part is half inches or quarter of an inch. So my rubber thread was giving me issues, so but I try to sew still, but just go ahead to do just as I did. So I started from the beginning here again. So just do as I said, so straight, and then you do it to the end. So right here, I'm done smoking for both the front and the back. I did not really get to the end because I noticed I'd already gotten the length I'd wanted. So I would just want to go ahead to measure what I have, my 18, ensure that I have my 18 inches intact, and also add half inches for joining allowance. So when smoking, if you add extra 6 inches or five, you want to also go ahead to measure your length so that you don't go ahead to over smoke. I don't know, the smoke, I feel like that smoking is stressful. So after that, what I want to do now is to place the front and the back together and go ahead to join both sides by half inches on both sides. So with this, we are done with the upper part and I'll be moving to the down part now. So the next thing we are going to do now is the lining. Sorry. So for this lining, I don't know, I lost the video where I cut it out, but I'll just explain how to go about it. So this lining is going to be long. Like there are no joining by the side. The only joining is going to be at the back part, which is the center back. So how you're going to go about this is that you're going to divide your hip round by 4, and whatever you get, you add 5 inches. So let's say for instance your hip round is 40 divided by 4 will give you 10 inches, and when you add 5 inches it's going to be 15 inches. So that 15 inches, you go ahead to multiply it by 4, and whatever you get is going to be your width for this lining. And for the length, you measure your length from your half length to where you want your gown to stop. So from the half length, like I said, where you want your gown to stop, you're going to measure what you have, and then you minus 4 inches. So let's say if your full length, from the half length, what you want is 22 inches. You're going to minus 4 inches from that 22 inches. So that's saying you're going to work with 18 inches for the length, and for the width, you're going to work with 60 inches per se if your hip is 60. So you divide if your hip, is 40 inches. So that is you dividing your hip by 4, adding 5 inches, and multiplying it in 4 places, multiplying it by 4 to get your width. So let me do a run through again. So I'm going to measure my top length. So what I have there, I'm going to also want to use that measure on my lining to get the length. So because I already cut out my lining, I removed 4 inches from the length to get the length of my lining, like I said earlier. So we're going to remove 4 inches so that it's going to be shorter. So when we are sewing the gathers, one of the tiered gathers is going to cover for that length. So, and again, don't bother about the lines marked on this lining. I'm going to explain how I went about that. So the next thing now is for the width. Like I said earlier, we divided our hip into 4 places. We divided our hip by 4 and added 5 inches, and whatever we had, we multiply it by 4, and that is how I got the width of. So now the next thing we're going to do now is for the lines. So for the lines, for the first line, what I did was that I measured 1 inches from half inches, I mean, from the up part down, and I went ahead to mark round. Then from the half inches round, which is the first line that I marked round, I came down by 5 inches, and I also went ahead also to mark it round. And also the third line, what I did was that I added 1 extra inches to my first line, which gave me 6 inches, and I also went ahead to mark round. So that is how I went about for the lines on the lining. So the next thing we want to do now is to cut out the ruffles line. So for the first layer, I'll be marking 7 inches for the width, and I'm also, what I have here for my length is my 45 inches, which is the Ankara length, and I'll go ahead to mark out this 7 inches into 4 places, cut it out into 4 places. And for the second ruffles, which is the second line, I'm going to do same thing, but make it 8 inches for the width and cut it out into 3 places. And for the third one, I'll do 9 inches and also cut it out into 3 places. Cutting out, you just want to go ahead to join the sides together and also hem them out by half inches. And then, so for this third part, which is what I'm going to show you now, you want to go ahead, place it just as you've seen me do, and go ahead to gather, but I'll advise you gather before trying to place it and sewing on it. So what I want to do now is to go ahead to mark half inches round on each of these lines. And what these half inches, we're not going to be sewing from the half inches. So from this part where my hand is where you're going to be sewing from. So I just wanted to show you what I meant on my sewing machine. So from that part, you just want to skip that part and from this other part is where you're going to start the gathers. But I just wanted to gather it here because my fabric was small. I did not have enough fabric, so that was why I'm gathering. But it's advisable you gather before sewing to the lining. So I just want to go ahead and do this round. And when I also go ahead, when I gather to the other end, the same half inches that I left in the beginning part, I also want to go ahead to leave that same half inches at the other end. I'll be repeating this process for the third and also for the second, and for the first line, which is where we left our half inches line. I'll show you how you're going to go about it because it's going to be different from this. You're not going to turn it over just as you're going to see, just as I did here. I mean, so right now I'm done with the second and the third part. So for the first part, which is the first layer, we have 4 inches and it is more full, so you want to go ahead to gather around, and after gathering around you place it just here on it. Like, you're not going to turn it over like the way we did for the other part. You just place it just like this after gathering around, and don't forget to also leave the half inches at the other sides, and you're going to sew round. So that is that for this. We are done with the skirt part right now. So at this point we are done with the up part, and if you've done gone ahead to gather, so we are done with the up part and we're also done with the down part. So what we want to do now is to sew the up part to the down part. So at this point you'll be needing your office pin. I went ahead to get the midpoint of my front, just as you see me did like that, and I also turn this part also to get the midpoint, and I'll use my office pin to hold it. Then the other part for the back, while I get the midpoint, you could also notch it. After notching, then use your office pin to also hold it so that it can serve as a guide while sewing. So at this point, when sewing this part, well, also after using your office pin to hold the round, you also want to need your rubber thread at this point. And I forgot to say, why sewing the gathers you don't need your rubber thread under. At this point you should have changed your rubber thread. For this particular part, we're going to need our rubber thread because if you notice, our width is 60 inches, and I mean our waist is not 60 inches round. So the rubber thread is going to help us to, should I say, it's going to help us to gather the waist part to fit in for this up part, and so that it will not be big. So the next thing, now I'm going to my sewing machine, repeat the same process we did while trying to sew the smoky, and the, don't forget, our smoky thread is just going to be under, and I'll just want to go ahead, just as you see me do now, sew round, and while I'm sewing, the under is going to be stretchy. For the under part, you can also, because it's going to be a bit thick, and stretching it for the smoky thread to stretch it might not stretch it as you want it to stretch it. You might also want to go to give it a little gather under so that it can be able to fit in for the upper part. So that is that for the under part. The next thing after this, now we want to go ahead to join the sides, and at this point our dress is almost ready. So for this part, we're going to be joining the lining. For the joining part, we're going to be joining the lining differently, and we are also going to be joining the Ankara part differently. So just as I have turned it, this is how you're going to go ahead to turn it. You will go ahead now to pick the first gathers, just as you see me do like this, the half inches that we left, you sew, then go ahead to the second one, pick the half inches that we also left, and go ahead to sew. You do this and repeat the same process. So after sewing this, the next thing you want to do after that is for the lining part. So you just want to go ahead also to join the lining part. So the reason why we are not joining them together is because I do not want the back looking somehow. Like, if you do this, the flare will be able to fit in well and it will look more better than it should before. So I'll go ahead to do for the lining part the Ankara fabric. So I'm done with the Ankara, joining the Ankara part, and the next thing I want to do now is the lining. So you just want to go ahead, pick the lining and just sew round with half inches. So, and that is that. And when you're done with this, the gown is ready, and you just want to also go ahead to hem your gown. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe and drop a beautiful comment.